The sun had just begun its descent, casting a golden hue over the quiet streets of Los Angeles. The city's chaos rumbled in the distance, but here, on this forgotten sidewalk, near an old bookstore, life moved slower. On the corner, nestled beside an abandoned newspaper stand, sat a man named Daniel. His once bright blue eyes had dulled with time, reflecting the hardships of a life spent surviving rather than truly living. His clothes were worn, a patchwork of hand-me-downs and donations, but despite the hardships, he carried himself with a quiet dignity. Beside him, curled up on a makeshift blanket, lay his only true companion, Max, a scruffy golden retriever with kind eyes and an ever-wagging tail. To the world, Max might have seemed like just another stray, but to Daniel, he was family. The two had been inseparable for years, relying on each other through hunger, cold nights, and the judgment of strangers who rarely stopped to see them as more than a fixture of the street. That evening, as Daniel sat against the wall, running a gentle hand through Max's fur, the street remained peaceful. The occasional passerby hurried along, lost in their own world, but Daniel wasn't bothered. He was content in his own way. Then a loud roar shattered the peace. A group of bikers thundered down the road, their engines growling like restless beasts. Most of them sped past, but one slowed down, veering toward the sidewalk where Daniel and Max sat. Daniel looked up, wary but not surprised. He had encountered people like this before, some kind, some cruel, most indifferent. The biker, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his arms, pulled off his helmet and smirked. His boots scuffed against the pavement as he approached. There was an arrogance in his posture, a swagger that suggested he was used to doing as he pleased. Max, always trusting, lifted his head and wagged his tail. "Look at this," the biker chuckled, turning to his friends who had stopped a few feet away. Man and his mutt. Daniel tensed but remained quiet, sensing trouble. The biker took another step closer and then, without warning, nudged Max roughly with his boot. Not a full kick, but forceful enough to make the dog yelp and recoil in surprise. Daniel's breath caught. He immediately reached for Max, checking to see if he was hurt. His hands trembled slightly as he ran them over his best friend's fur, feeling the shiver of fear ripple through the dog's small frame. Laughter erupted from the biker's friends. "What the hell, man?" Daniel's voice was quiet but firm, laced with barely restrained anger. The biker shrugged. "Relax, it's just a dog." Daniel looked up, meeting the man's gaze, his own filled with something deeper than anger, disappointment, sadness. "No," he said simply. "He's not just a dog." The laughter died down as an eerie silence settled over the scene. And that's when the biker noticed him. Across the street, standing beside a parked black motorcycle, was a man dressed in dark jeans and a leather jacket. His posture was relaxed, but there was a quiet intensity in the way he observed the scene. Keanu Reeves. The name alone carried weight, but at this moment he wasn't a movie star. He wasn't John Wick or Neo or any of the characters people associated with him. He was just a man who had seen something he couldn't ignore. He removed his sunglasses and took a step forward, his expression unreadable. The biker, who had moments ago been so full of arrogance, now seemed uncertain. Keanu's voice, when he spoke, was calm, measured. "Apologize," the biker scoffed, trying to laugh it off. "Who the hell are you?" Keanu took another step closer. "Someone who believes in kindness," he said simply. The biker shifted uncomfortably, looking between his friends and Keanu. The laughter from earlier had vanished, replaced by something else, an awareness that the situation had changed. Max, still curled up against Daniel, let out a small whimper. Keanu's gaze flickered to the dog, then back to the biker. His next words were softer, but they carried the weight of steel. "You see that dog?" Keanu asked. "He's more loyal than any of us will ever be. He trusts. He forgives. He loves without condition. The biker's bravado crumbled further. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. "Apologize," he repeated, but this time there was no room for argument. The biker hesitated, then knelt down beside Max. For a long moment, he simply stared at the dog. Then, hesitantly, he reached out and gently patted Max's head. "Sorry, bud," he muttered. Max, ever forgiving, licked the biker's hand. Daniel watched, his heart pounding. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. This was change. The biker stood, awkwardly clearing his throat. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a wad of cash, more than Daniel had ever seen at once. Without a word, he placed it beside Daniel and Max, then turned and walked back to his bike. His friends followed, still silent. Keanu watched them go, then knelt beside Max, scratching him gently behind the ears. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. Max wagged his tail, leaning into the touch. Daniel, still trying to process what had just happened, found his voice. "Why did you do that?" Keanu smiled softly. "Because kindness is a choice." He looked at Daniel, his gaze steady. And someone needed to remind him of that. Over the next few weeks, Daniel's life changed in ways he never expected. Keanu ensured Max got checked by a vet, covering all costs. He even helped Daniel find work at a local animal shelter, a place where he could channel his love for animals into something meaningful. The money left by the biker was enough for Daniel to get off the streets, to find a small place to stay. It wasn't much, but it was home. And Max? Max never stopped wagging his tail. He had always believed in people, and now, for the first time in a long while, Daniel did too. Sometimes the world is harsh, but sometimes, just when you least expect it, someone steps in. Not for fame, not for recognition, but simply because it's the right thing to do. And in that moment, for Daniel and Max, the world wasn't so cruel after all.